The principal, a kind-hearted man who had seen many children come and go, was initially unsure. How could a blind child possibly keep up with the rest of the class? But he eventually agreed, impressed by the unwavering determination in the mother's eyes, and started school with a mix of excitement and fear. At first, the other children were curious. Some even mocked him, calling him the blind boy. But An never let their words affect him. He simply focused on his lessons, listening intently, memorizing every word his teacher said. He learned faster than anyone expected, using his keen sense of hearing and memory to compensate for his lack of sight. His classmates were amazed. They started to see him not as a helpless child, but as someone with remarkable ability. And as for An, he never felt sorry for himself. He saw the world not with his eyes, but through the lens of his heart. It was in this environment, surrounded by both kindness and cruelty, that An learned his first important lesson. The world would not give him anything easily, but that didn't mean he couldn't take it for himself. From that moment, An knew that despite his blindness, he would never stop learning. He would never stop striving. The road ahead would be tough, but he was ready. He would let nothing stop him from achieving his dreams, and he would prove to the world that even in darkness, there could be light. As An grew older, his mother's dream for him never wavered. Though he faced challenges that no child should ever have to endure, she believed that education was the key to his future. She knew that education was the most powerful tool for breaking down barriers, and she would fight every obstacle to ensure An had the chance to learn. An's early years in school were not easy. The children in his class often made fun of him, and the teachers struggled to know how to help him. It wasn't that they didn't care, but rather that they had never been trained to teach children with disabilities. They had never encountered a blind student, and they didn't know how to help him succeed. But An was determined. Despite the challenges, he excelled in his studies. His incredible memory, sharp hearing, and strong will to learn made him a star pupil in his class. Every evening, his mother would sit with him, reading books in Braille and helping him with his lessons. No matter how tired they both were, they never stopped. One day, when An was about 10 years old, a new teacher came to the village school. Her name was Mrs. Lawn, and she had heard about An's special talents. When she first met him, she saw not a blind child, but a bright young mind eager to learn. Mrs. Lawn was determined to help An succeed. She worked closely with him, creating special lessons that focused on his strengths. She encouraged him to explore music, which he quickly became passionate about, and helped him use his love for learning as a foundation for his academic success. The other children in the class began to admire An's perseverance. They realized that even though he couldn't see, he was like them in many ways. He had dreams, ambitions, and the drive to achieve them. Slowly, the teasing stopped, and a new kind of respect grew in the classroom. However, even as An's academic abilities blossomed, he faced challenges outside of school. The villagers, while supportive, still saw him as different. Some would question whether a blind child could ever contribute to society in any meaningful way. Yet, An never let these doubts get to him. His mother's unwavering faith in him and his own determination were enough to keep him going. An was born on a quiet summer evening in a small rural village. The stars twinkled in the clear sky, but in the heart of his family, a storm had just begun. His mother, Hoa, had waited years to have a child. When she finally gave birth, it was to a son who came into the world blind. An's eyes were not able to see the light, and his world would forever remain dark. In the small, humble home, the news of An's blindness spread quickly. There was shock, then pity. Some relatives whispered that the child would be a burden to the family, that he would never be able to live like others. It was a harsh reality for a poor rural family, where every child was expected to help with work and bring joy into the home. An's mother was heartbroken, but she never gave up hope. She loved her son with all her heart. Her entire world now revolved around him. She spent every moment caring for him, reassuring him that despite his blindness, he could still live a meaningful life. She believed that her child was no different from any other, and with love and care, he would find his way. However, the world outside was not so kind. People in the village would sometimes pity him, and there were even whispers of how the child would grow up to be a burden, unable to contribute anything to society. These hurtful words stung his mother deeply. But every time she saw Anne's innocent smile, she knew she had to fight for him. No one else would fight for him, so she would. As Anne grew older, his disability became more apparent. He couldn't go out to play like other children. He couldn't help his father in the fields or assist his mother in the kitchen. He spent most of his time in the house, surrounded by the love of his mother and the quiet, heavy silence of the world around him. But even though Anne was blind, he didn't let it stop him. He never saw the pity in the eyes of others, but he could hear it in their voices. Yet, he wasn't sad. He was determined. He would always say to his mother, "I don't need to see to be happy. I just need to learn." Anne's mother refused to let him be restricted by society's views on what he could or couldn't do. She would talk to him, teach him to read using Braille, and help him understand the world around him through his other senses. They spent countless hours together, listening to stories, singing, and learning. Anne's world was different, but that didn't mean it was empty. When Anne turned 5, his mother decided it was time for him to start school. The village school, a modest one-room building, didn't have the resources to cater to children with disabilities. But his mother, insistent on her son's education, went to meet with the principal. "Please, let my son learn. He may not see, but he can hear and understand. He deserves the chance," she pleaded. As he entered high school, and began to dream bigger. He wanted to attend university, but the path was difficult. There were very few resources available for blind students, and the prospect of higher education seemed like an unreachable goal. Many people told him it was unrealistic, that he should accept his limitations and focus on simpler, more achievable goals. But Anne refused to listen to the doubters. He knew he was capable of much more than anyone expected. Determined to pursue his dream, Anne began to study relentlessly. He not only studied the standard curriculum, but he also taught himself how to use computers with screen reader software and learned how to navigate the internet. He read books on philosophy, history, and literature, broadening his understanding of the world around him. One of the most difficult challenges he faced was the entrance exam for the university. The exam was only available in a format that Anne could not access. His mother reached out to the university administration, pleading for them to provide a way for Anne to take the exam in a format he could use. After much back and forth, the university agreed to give him a special exam with Braille materials and a scribe to assist him. When Anne took the exam, he knew that no matter what the result was, he had already accomplished something incredible. It wasn't just about passing the test, it was about overcoming every barrier that had been placed in his way. The day the results came back, Anne was overjoyed to learn that he had passed and was accepted into the university of his dreams. His mother cried tears of happiness, knowing that all their sacrifices had been worth it. For Anne, it was a moment of triumph not only for himself but for everyone who had ever doubted him. Anne's journey through university was filled with challenges. The textbooks were still a struggle to access, and he had to rely on his memory and his friends to help him navigate his way around campus. But through it all, he remained focused. He earned top grades and began to make a name for himself as a student who defied expectations. During his time at university, Anne realized that education wasn't just about learning from textbooks, it was about learning from life. He started to get involved in advocacy work for people with disabilities, speaking at events and sharing his story. He became a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves, showing others that with perseverance, anyone could overcome their obstacles. By the time he graduated, and had earned not only a degree but also the respect of his peers and professors. He had proven that disability was not an obstacle to success, and he had inspired others to believe in themselves as well. Anne's journey through education was not easy, and it was not without its hardships. But with the support of his mother, the guidance of his teachers, and his own unyielding perseverance, he had proven that no barrier was too great to overcome. After graduating from university, and returned to his village, carrying with him not just a degree but a deep sense of purpose. The village that had once whispered about his disability now stood as a place where he would make his mark. He was no longer the blind child from the small house, he was now a university graduate, armed with knowledge, determination, and a new mission, to help other children like him. However, when he returned to the village, he knew that his journey was far from over. His education had been just the beginning. He wanted to create a space for children with disabilities, a place where they could feel seen, heard, and valued. He could see so clearly that there were so many children in his community, like him, who were being held back by society's limited understanding of what they could achieve. And started by opening a small school in his home, teaching children with various disabilities. At first, there were only a handful of students, children with hearing impairments, those with physical disabilities, and a few others with conditions like autism. The parents of these children were skeptical at first, unsure of what a blind teacher could possibly offer. But Anne's mother stood by his side, helping him with the logistics and ensuring the classroom was accessible. In the early days, there were many challenges. The children had trouble adjusting to the lessons. Some of them had never been taught to read or write. Others had been neglected by the traditional education system. But Anne's belief in them never wavered. He patiently worked with each child, teaching them at their own pace, helping them to discover their own strengths. Soon, the word spread. Parents from neighboring villages began bringing their children to Anne's school, believing in the possibility he represented. Slowly, the small classroom filled with laughter and learning. Anne adapted his lessons, not only focusing on academics but also on building life skills, teaching the children to interact with the world around them, to care for themselves, and to express their needs. One of his students, a young boy named Hai, had been abandoned by his family because of his physical disability. He had spent most of his childhood in isolation. When he came to Anne's school, he was shy, withdrawn, and had trouble trusting others. But with Anne's help, Hai began to blossom. He learned how to communicate effectively, how to engage with his classmates, and how to express his feelings. As Hai became more confident, his parents saw a change in him. They saw a boy who was no longer broken by his disability, but a boy who was empowered by his education. Hai's parents began to trust him more, and soon, they became active participants in their child's education. It wasn't just Hai who was learning, the whole family was learning how to accept and support their son. Anne's impact wasn't limited to the classroom. He began to work closely with local authorities and organizations to advocate for children with disabilities. He was invited to speak at forums and workshops, sharing his story and helping to change perceptions about what children with disabilities could achieve. His voice was a powerful one. He spoke not with bitterness or anger, but with a calm assurance that change was possible. He explained that children with disabilities didn't need pity, they needed understanding, support, and opportunities. He challenged the community to see the potential in every child, regardless of their abilities. Anne's efforts began to ripple outward. The local government supported the creation of more inclusive education programs, and other teachers began to follow his example. And helped train them, providing guidance on how to teach children with special needs. His work started to have a lasting impact not just in his village, but throughout the region. One of the most significant changes occurred when he partnered with a group of local entrepreneurs to raise funds to build a special education center. This center would provide a safe space for children with disabilities to learn and grow. It would offer therapies, education, and vocational training. For Anne, it was a dream come true, a place where every child with a disability could have access to the resources they needed to succeed. Opening the center was a moment of triumph, not just for Anne, but for the entire community. It symbolized the beginning of a new chapter, one where children with disabilities were no longer hidden away, but were celebrated for who they were. Anne's work didn't stop there. He continued to teach, to advocate, and to inspire. He never sought fame or recognition, but his story spread far and wide. People began to see him not just as the blind teacher, but as a symbol of perseverance, hope, and resilience. Years passed, and Anne's school continued to grow. More children came, more teachers were trained, and the message of inclusion began to take root in the hearts of many. Anne's legacy wasn't just about the children he taught, it was about the culture he helped create. He had changed the way his village, and even the broader community, thought about people with disabilities. But through it all, Anne remained the same humble person. He never let the accolades or the recognition change him. He was still the teacher who couldn't see, but who could feel the heartbeats of the children he loved. And in the quiet moments, when the classroom was empty and the day's lessons were over, Anne would sit quietly, listening to the world around him. He would smile to himself, knowing that his purpose in life had been fulfilled. He had made a difference, not just in the lives of the children he taught, but in the very fabric of the community that had once doubted him. And had proved that with love, determination, and unwavering faith in others, even the greatest challenges could be overcome. As Anne's work continued to grow, his story reached far beyond the boundaries of his village. He was invited to share his experiences at national and even international forums, where his story of perseverance and the positive impact he was making on children with disabilities touched the hearts of many. One day, Anne received an invitation to participate in an international education conference in Singapore. The conference, dedicated to inclusive education, sought to highlight stories of individuals who had overcome significant obstacles to make a positive impact on society. Anne was honored, but he had never imagined that his work would be recognized on such a grand scale. He saw it as an opportunity to not only share his personal journey but to give a voice to all the children he had taught over the years. When Anne stepped onto the stage in Singapore, the auditorium was filled with educators, policymakers, and activists from all over the world. He couldn't see the audience, but he could feel their presence. His heart raced, but he knew this moment was bigger than himself. It was about showing the world what children with disabilities could achieve when given the right support. He began his speech with a simple but powerful message. "I cannot see the world in the way you do, but I see with my heart. And what I see is that every child, no matter their disability, has the potential to achieve greatness." His words resonated deeply with the audience. He spoke about the importance of inclusive education, the challenges children with disabilities face, and the transformative power of belief in one's potential. Anne's message was not just about his own success, it was about the collective success of all children who, like him, were once seen as different or less than. Anne's speech was a turning point in his life. It sparked conversations about how to create more inclusive educational systems around the world. His words were shared widely on social media, inspiring educators, parents, and activists to reimagine what inclusion could look like in schools and communities. But despite the recognition and accolades, Anne remained grounded. He never lost sight of the reason he had started this journey in the first place, to help children like him, children who were often overlooked and underestimated, find their place in the world. For Anne, the most rewarding part of his work was seeing the children he had taught go on to achieve things they once thought impossible. One of his former students, Ton, who had been deaf and mute, returned to the village after completing his university degree. Ton had gone on to become a counselor for children with disabilities, and his success was a testament to the effectiveness of Anne's teaching and belief in the power of inclusion. Ton now worked alongside Anne to train new teachers and advocate for the rights of children with disabilities. Another former student, Lynn, had once been confined to a wheelchair and had struggled with basic mobility skills. With Anne's help, Lynn had learned to navigate the world independently and had even become a successful graphic designer. Lynn often visited Anne's school, teaching the younger students how to use technology to create and express themselves. Anne's legacy began to take shape as a broader movement, a movement that challenged societal perceptions of disability and showcased the extraordinary potential of every child. Schools and communities began to adopt more inclusive practices, and Anne's model for teaching children with disabilities spread to other regions of the country. His influence even reached policymakers, who began to advocate for more inclusive policies in education. As Anne's work gained recognition, he was invited to meet with government officials to discuss the future of inclusive education in the country. These meetings were pivotal in shaping the educational landscape for children with disabilities, pushing for better resources, training for teachers, and a curriculum that catered to the needs of every student, regardless of their abilities. Anne's journey was never about fame or recognition, it was about making a difference in the lives of children who had always been told they couldn't succeed. Yet, the recognition he received only fueled his drive to do more. He used the platform he had earned to speak on behalf of those who still lacked access to education and opportunities. And while his work was far from over, Anne knew that he had already made an indelible mark on the world. He had shown that the limits placed on people with disabilities were not inherent, they were societal constructs that could be dismantled through education, advocacy, and love. In the years that followed, Anne continued to teach, mentor, and inspire. His school expanded, and more children with disabilities enrolled, each one finding their own path toward independence and success. The inclusive education center he had dreamed of became a beacon of hope for many families. Parents who once believed that their children's disabilities would hold them back now saw endless possibilities for their futures. And never stopped working, always striving to improve the lives of those who had been forgotten by society. His passion for teaching remained as strong as ever, and he continued to believe that every child deserved an education that acknowledged their worth. As Anne grew older, his health began to decline, but his spirit never wavered. He continued to inspire generations of students, teachers, and parents, leaving behind a legacy of love, resilience, and the unwavering belief that every child deserves the opportunity to reach their fullest potential. Anne's life had been a testament to the power of persistence and the transformative impact of inclusive education. He had proven that when we look beyond the surface, beyond the limitations that society imposes, we can uncover the true potential of every person. And in doing so, he had changed the world, not just for children with disabilities, but for everyone who believed in the power of education to uplift and transform lives. The years following Anne's return to his village to teach were simple, just like his life. Every morning, he would wake up, step outside to exercise by counting his steps, and then make a cup of tea for his mother. Afterward, his special education class in their small house would be filled with the laughter of children. At first, it was just a few children with disabilities from nearby villages, but soon, more and more students began to come. Some traveled from distant districts. Each child had their own story. Some were paralyzed, some were deaf and mute, some had autism, and some, like Anne, were blind. But all of them shared one thing in common: they had been considered a burden by society until they walked into the classroom of a teacher who couldn't see the light. There were no miracles in Anne's classroom, except for trust. And didn't teach the children with rigid textbooks. He taught them how to perceive the world with the remaining senses, with their hearts, and with infinite patience. He researched materials from abroad, connected with experts in special education, and even learned how to teach children with multiple disabilities. One deaf student named Naam had never spoken a word in 7 years. After 6 months of learning with Anne, he uttered his first word, "teacher," with all the effort he could muster. That day, Anne cried. Not because of ordinary emotion, but because it was proof that when persistence and love combine, even the impossible can happen. Anne's story began to spread in the media. First, it was a small feature on the provincial TV, then a national program on inclusive education. Every time Anne was invited to speak, he remained humble. "I haven't done anything extraordinary. I just do ordinary things with the heart of someone who lived in the dark." People began calling Anne by many titles: the lamp in the dark, the teacher who cannot see but has far vision, the embodiment of perseverance through adversity. But to his students, Anne was still just teacher Anne, the one who smiled often, spoke with a warm voice, and always listened, even though he could not see their eyes. One day, Anne received an invitation to participate in the Southeast Asian Education Forum, an event honoring those who have made exceptional contributions in the field of education for children with disabilities. Although he had never traveled abroad, and accepted the invitation. Not for recognition, but because he wanted to bring the voices of millions of disadvantaged children from Vietnam to the world. Standing on the stage in a large auditorium in Singapore, and began his speech with words that silenced the entire room. I cannot see any of you. But I believe we are all looking in the same direction, toward a world where every child, whether disabled or healthy, has the right to learn, to live, and to dream. N's speech was later translated into more than 10 languages and cited in many global education forums. But what made N the happiest was that after the event, a woman from Indonesia came to him with her daughter, who was blind, and said, "Thank you. Because of you, I now have the courage to never give up on my child." When N returned home, he continued his teaching. But now, his classroom was no longer confined to a small house. Many volunteers and young teachers came to learn from his model. Other regions invited him to consult. Some philanthropists contributed money to build a community special education center, which N now managed. And even if that center grew larger over time, people still saw Teacher N sitting with his students, teaching them letter by letter, correcting their pronunciation, or gently patting a child who was crying in sadness. In the year N turned 40, a ceremony was held to celebrate his 20 years of teaching. The old school grounds were crowded with people. Students from all over came back. Many of them had grown up, some became teachers of children with disabilities, others worked as rehabilitation doctors, and some became psychological counselors. Everyone spoke of N with love and reverence. A former student took the stage and said, "Back then, I thought being blind was a sentence. But thanks to you, I realized that darkness is not where I end, it's where I begin a new journey. Teacher, you didn't leave behind wealth or fame, you left us, students who once thought they couldn't keep going, but thanks to you, we learned how to rise and walk toward the sun." And sat quietly in his usual chair, his hands still gently running along the edge of the desk. He couldn't see everything, but he could clearly feel that every laugh, every round of applause, every hug, every gentle touch was proof of something he had pursued all his life. No one is born to be left behind. No fate is hopeless, if it is seen through love and nurtured by determination. And that was the greatest legacy that Teacher N, the teacher who could not see the light, left for the world, unyielding faith.